month ago, and it was something very special for me.
One of the most extraordinary incidents when he was in the slaughterhouse was that the slaughterman drained blood into a cup and passed it to him. They thought this boy would simply freak out. He did exactly the opposite. Drank the blood, which in turn freaked them out.
Here's a child who goes on family holidays to the countryside. And what normal children do? What are they interested in? They're interested in flowers, right? Swimming as much as possible. What does Carol Cott want to do? He wants to slice up an animal. And he wants to drink the animal's blood. And he wants to do it in front of people. He wants them to be entertained by it or amazed by it. This is extraordinarily rare behavior.
At the same time, young Carol Cott developed a disturbing fetish.
He said that knife was like his biggest love he can think of. He was admiring knives. He actually had some kind of knives.
Cott's rare obsession.
This is something that you can track. Very important in the house.
While at school, Cott joined a target shooting club where he met a girl, Danusha, that he soon became obsessed with. She was 6 years older than Carol.
They became like friends, but from his side, I think this relationship looked a bit different. I think she treated him as a friend and he was in love.
It wouldn't surprise me if this relationship wasn't one of equals, because I think here is a young man who doesn't have those social skills.
In a twisted bid to impress Danusha, Cott revealed to her some of his sadistic fantasies and cruel acts he had committed.
I suspect she finds him cute. She's sure the stories were untrue or made up. But she's just not excited by them. And in some ways, that's exactly what Cott needs. He needs somebody storytell to really live with, not have them scream.
On a shooting club outing, the young Cott could not contain his violent urges.
He attacked her. He pulled out a piece of broken glass from his pocket. He told her to cut her throat and throw her into the river so it would look like a suicide.
This is basically his frustrations because he can't get what he wants. And the only way he knows to get what he wants, based on his past experience, is to be violent, is to be abusive, is to be manipulative. But it doesn't quite work with Danusha.
She responds in a very interesting way. She doesn't take it seriously. And tells him, in essence, so if you kill me, you'll definitely become yourselves. What you have to be impressed with is yourself. So momentary psychological sophistication probably saved your life.
But on September the 21st, 1964, the 17-year-old schoolboy felt compelled to attack a stranger for the first time. Elena entered a judge in the center of the city
took out a German military bayonet from the sheath, and he stabbed her in the back.
He stabbed her just like once in her back, trying to reach the heart from the back.
When someone is stabbed, they will describe feelings if they've been punched. You don't necessarily get that sharp feeling you might imagine. And that would be a surprise, it would be a shock, it would be unpleasant.
So many weapons are coming out that they realise what's going on. So in the moments in this blitz attack, I think perhaps this victim didn't really understand what was going on.
We talk about a 48-year-old woman, so to stab someone to the back, you are primarily looking at damaged lungs, and that certainly can be lethal, but it's not usually instantly fatal.
The woman didn't realise that this had happened. She probably didn't feel any pain. It was only after she left that she realised, when she went to a shop and someone told her that her clothes were bloodstained.
The interesting thing about the first attack is it shows stabbing behavior doesn't have a chance. He doesn't understand what it kills. So it's like he's exploring it. It's like he rushes in, he stabs, he waits for something to happen. He thinks magic's going to happen. Blood's going to be everywhere and he's going to have a dead body.
But the schoolboy's bloody intent was far from blunted.
So here we've got this individual who associates power and status with harm, and whether or not the victim died.
Okay, wait a minute.
Krakow, Poland, September the 23rd, 1964. Just 2 days after his first attack, 17-year-old Carol Kott was on the prowl again. His next target was an elderly woman chosen at random.
The second attack happened only 2 days later, and I think this indicates how much he enjoyed the first attack and how much he wanted to continue the high that had come from
In my mind, I think he was the life of Carol Kott. He was fulfilling, blossoming, if you like, into a fully fledged killer. I think he set himself that dream. The butterfly was emerging from the chrysalis.
Kott wanted to kill again, but still a schoolboy, the young man needed a victim who wouldn't fight back.
One characteristic that connects all the incidents
I think the choice of victims is no accident whatsoever. We know that elderly people and elderly women in particular are one of the target groups of serial killers because they are physically weaker and they're on their own, and that vulnerability makes it easy to target them and to take their lives.
Kott's next victim was a 78-year-old woman called Francesca. He spotted her getting off a tram. When she entered the apartment building, Kott attacked.
Kott stabbed her, again in the back. This time, she felt the pain more quickly. Kott disappeared.
Francesca did indeed survive the attack, but she never recovered from her wounds.
The stabbings pierced her backbone, and she had problems walking for the rest of her life.
I think that Kott, with all of his victims, he was trying to kill them, but he wasn't willing to hang around long enough to make sure of it. He was trying to escape.
The news of the shocking attacks rattled the citizens of Krakow, but that only served to embolden 17-year-old Carol Kott.
There would have been a bit of a buzz, a bit of a fear in the community around him, and to know that he created this is something that he's going to be really enjoying. So he will be escalating his offending. It is going to be...
Oh, no, this ain't good.
never in a million years would you think that somebody has just randomly come and stabbed you. So it would have been incredibly shocking.
This time, his victim, 86-year-old Maria, died. But not before she managed to say a few last words to the nun who found her.
The nun said that when she got close to her, she lay on the floor, breathing heavily, and she said just 2 words, young boy.
Today, one of Poland's leading coroners, Thomas Konopka, works at the same hospital where Maria's post-mortem was carried out.
The post-mortem examination was conducted here, in this autopsy room. The examination showed that the wound was not deep. The wound went through the back, through the muscles, and ended in the backbone. The conclusion was that because of the pain and shock related to the stabbing in the back, her heart gave out and she died.
The senseless murder committed by a schoolboy was headline news across Poland.
Panic broke out in Krakow. People were afraid of going out in the evenings, especially women. People were warned not to go out alone, not to go alone to the church.
I think it was very difficult for the inhabitants of Krakow to comprehend that a boy could be responsible. The first reaction was disbelief. The second reaction was fear.
And then in the autumn of 1964, Kott's knife attacks suddenly stopped.
I think he just calmed down after he actually for the first time succeeded to kill someone. He was just continuing going to school, going to his shooting section, just normal everyday life.
In fact, his murdering images were
period, but during
love.
time, he still would have been having violent thoughts and violent fantasies.
You know what I
And
need to
we
do?
can see that this is exactly the case with him.
He was still bent on killing, but this time he wanted to murder en masse. So at the end of 1964, Kurt changed his MO.
So he's always creating harm, he's always externalizing his trauma to hurt other people.
He confessed that he had planned to kill a large number of people by changing his method to poisoning or arson.
He was putting poison, for example, into
Look at what he actually does. Really confirms how he does things like go to drinking stations. He doesn't have a grasp of social behavior. People don't go around bars picking up half-drunk drinks and drinking. That's just
We only know about them from his testimony. For example, he called gasoline on civilians, and he hoped to start a fire. Smoke and fire.
Four fires that he set.
he doesn't even know how to do it. He can't out to save his life. He's just trying to find a way to get death to happen. Doing as little as possible, and you can't see.
this time. That's a Tommy. Tommy's child.
February the 13th, 1966, Carol Cott was looking for an easy target. He spotted 11
and Carol just was walking around looking for a victim.
For the sec, the speed of the attack would likely have been stunning.
And this attack is really ferocious. So he turns the boy towards him. He stabs it 11 times. And this is a real ramping up of his offending. So he's not just killing this individual, he's using much more violence than he needs to get that job done. So this is about more than that. This is about completely obliterating someone. This is about saying, I can do to you whatever I want to do to you. It's about status, it's about power, and it's about entitlement.
We must be grateful to some extent that stab wounds are not usually tremendously painful. They can often feel more like a punch. But it must be utterly confusing and bewildering that somebody has suddenly started to assault you and then very quickly, within probably seconds in this case, you will lose consciousness, die, gone from being a normal child, doing normal childhood things, to being a body.
The autopsy later revealed that Cott had punctured every major organ in the young boy's body. The stabs were deep. The strikes damaged the aorta, the heart, the lungs, and the liver. The boy had no chance of surviving the attack. As Lesec lay bleeding to death, Cott walked away. He just left him there and walked away. What surprised me was that he said that he went straight to the patisserie, bought some cakes, and took them home. The attack on the 11-year-old boy was a clear sign of Cott's ferocity had escalated.
It's new form. This is the fully fledged I can tell. It's true.
Krakow, southern Poland. By the end of February 1966, Carol Cott, now aged 19, had viciously attacked 4 people with a knife, killing 2, 86-year-old Maria and an 11-year-old boy, Leszek. But Carol Cott's lust for blood was far from satiated. On April the 14th, 1966, 2 months after he last killed, Cott struck again.
His next attack is on a 7-year-old girl, so he's targeting vulnerable victims. He's targeting people who he feels he can control, who he feels he's got power over.
Cott hid in the stairwell of a small tenement building and waited for a suitable victim to attack. His decision depended on who would appear. A 7-year-old girl came to the mailbox from the upstairs. He approached her, grabbed her with one hand, and stabbed her with the other. He stabbed her 8 times and left the girl wounded and bleeding. The 7-year-old Malgosha survived the brutal attack. However, the psychological scars would last a lifetime.
These children, because they are only just forming their views of the world, their views of other people, and to be attacked randomly by someone who is also just a child is something that will stay with them forever, and it's going to shape their relationships with other people. Very often people who are attacked as children can move on from it. They can go on and have fulfilling lives and move on from their trauma, but it's something that really is going to set them off the track that they were on for quite some time.
After the vicious attack, Cott confessed to attacking the 7-year-old girl to the woman he was still obsessed with, Danusha.
He tells her what he's done, and I don't think this is any kind of remorse or any kind of catharsis. I think this is, look at me, look what I can achieve. You should be impressed by this.
For some reason, Cott decides to boast that he has attacked the child. She doesn't believe. She thinks fantasy, another
after his final exams in school, and I think that really does bring home how horrific this is. These horrendous crimes that have been committed by someone. When he was arrested in school, the most striking moment of the case was when he was arrested, and everybody realized that everybody had prayed. Most of the time, this was just a young school.
Was up first. You could say that Greco breathed a sigh of relief. Afraid of a killer. Carol was not ready to admit his guilt. But when he was presented to the two elderly ladies that survived the first attacks, he was instantly identified by them. If she wanted, he must be Carol Cott had no choice but to confess his crime.
Cott doesn't plead innocence. He glories in his guilt. This is exactly what he's always wanted. This is the tableau that he wanted to paint for himself. He tells him that detail about the way he killed.
He bragged about these crimes. He talked about these acts like it gave him pleasure.
The press gave him the nickname Must. Must.
want to be lauded by other people. And I think having that name, that the vampire, this brings with it some kind of status. And I think
soon after he was arrested in July of 1966, 19-year-old Carol Cott gleefully participated in the reconstructions of his crimes.
Now, police do reenactments as a common technique. There are many reasons to do that. One of the most important reasons to do that is a reenactment is one of the ways that you determine whether or not a person claiming to be the killer is the real killer, or whether or not they are somebody who is just seeking the fame. The reenactment will show whether or not you did the crime in a way that is consistent with the physical evidence, and it allows you to be more sure.
A reconstruction can be a useful thing to do. It enables witnesses' memories to be jogged. It sometimes leads to new evidence, but in this case, I think he got more out of it than anybody else did.
He was actually a kind of directing of the show, and he was just saying to cameraman or where to put lights. I'm gonna start from that direction, so that light shouldn't be here. You will not see anything, and stuff like that.
He was up on a pedestal. He was important for that moment. There was a crowd of policemen around him, a crowd of people, and finally he could start showing off.
One of the policemen asked him, does it feel the same to do it all over again? He says, we're almost back to just one thing.
Any doubts among the police officers as to Cott's guilt, the young man's reaction during the questions put them to rest.
We noticed that he did because they made the reconstruction of all 5 attacks, and he was showing every details what exactly he was doing.
He did not show any remorse. He was proud of what he did. He described the scenes of murders. He even showed how he licked blood on the side.
Carol Cott was put on trial in Krakow on the 3rd of May 1967.
As a school, was to trial. 2 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of arson. All before the age of 20.
In addition to his knife attacks on the 2 children and 3 elderly women, Cott was also prosecuted for the many other murders he took put at risk in his poison and arson attacks.
Obviously, everybody was in shock. His whole family and friends were in shock. That such an innocent little person from such a good family could do such terrible things.
In all, 64 witnesses testified at the trial. Many took to the stand to vouch for the young man's character.
Initially, everybody defended him, not only his family, but even his school teachers. There is a letter in the files written by his shooting section trainer that shows his support for Cott and his innocence.
But Cott's behavior in the courtroom shocked both friend and foe. The young man who killed 2 innocent people and had attempted to murder many more relished the limelight.
He was cheerful. He was laughing. While his friends were testifying, he was waving to them. You could see that on the films shot in the courtroom. He was proud then that he could perform almost like an actor, that he was the center of attention. He was even proud of what he did. It horrifies me.
During the trial, Cott displayed disdain for the pain and suffering he'd inflicted on the innocent.
At the trial, he just showed a complete disregard for his victims and their families. There was an absolute lack of remorse, and that doesn't surprise me whatsoever, because here we have somebody who only cares about themselves. If he felt sorry, he would only feel sorry for himself. He'd only be sorry that he got caught. And unfortunately, you're never going to get sympathy from somebody like this. They don't care about the mayhem that they create. They just care about what it's done for them.
He showed no remorse. There was no apologies to the victims. He simply went blank because he was fulfilling his own fantasy of himself. He was fulfilling the painting that he'd always wanted to paint of his life. This was God's creation, and the killings were that.
He didn't ever admit that he's feeling sorry. He was saying that to him it was moral, because what brings pleasure, that is moral, and that it was his private thing that he was taking someone else's life, but he doesn't think that he's criminal.
Cott soon alienated his family and friends.
Had he not been caught, I think he would have just gone on to kill even more people in even more violent ways. This is somebody who enjoyed killing, who enjoyed feeling power over others.
When he started to say that it brought him pleasure and he would continue to kill, the voices of support fell away.
Cott confessed in detail to all of his crimes.
Usually the perpetrators of such killings defend themselves, try to come up with any line of defense. He did not do that.
After a series of appeals on March the 17th, 1968, Poland's Supreme Court convicted Karol Gott of 2 counts of murder, 10 counts of attempted murder, and 4 counts of arson.
When he was sentenced, the judge said of him that he was more dangerous than a savage beast because he was endowed with reason. Cott was certainly not insane. He never, for one moment, expressed an item of regret or remorse for any of his victims.
At the age of 21, Cott
Mighty
was
dragon.
sentenced to death.
Thou art a true born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights.
Thereby ending the story of his friend.
Well,
Could truly be called one of the world's most. He said it.
plain as a lord. I command thee.
He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was wrong.
I
It's something he
am
chose
the
to
lord
do.
of
He knew that
all
it
that
was
is
right.
golden.
Yeah, he chose to harm others anyway.
The senseless and sadistic murder of the most vulnerable of victims, an 11-year-old boy and an 86-year-old woman, as well as the attempted murder of children and the elderly.
Thou art unfit even to craft.
Lane County Courthouse, Eugene, Oregon. May 8, 1984. A U.S. mail carrier and a mother of 3 stood accused of the murder of her daughter, 7-year-old Cheryl, and the attempted murder of her 2 other children, 8-year-old Christy and 3-year-old Danny. Her name, Diane Downs.
Diane Downs was pure evil,
Rah,
wrapped up
rah,
in some
rah.
smile. To this day, she has never admitted that she did the deed.
But when her daughter Christy testified, the terrible truth was all too clear.
When the person asked her the question, who shot you and your sibling, she said, my mum did it.
It was a court case that shook America, and all the while Downs insisted she'd never harmed her family.
She violated that sacred duty and attempted in cold blood to kill three of her children.
The callous murderer of her daughter and the other children makes Diane Downs one of the world's most evil killers. Springfield, Oregon, May 1983. The small industrial town that lies next door to the city of Eugene was home to one of America's most reviled murderers, Diane Downs. The 27-year-old mother had driven her 3 children to a remote location just outside of town. Diane Downs then pulled her to the side of the road and shot her into her. 7-year-old Cheryl died. Her siblings Christy and Debbie survived the ordeal, but were left scarred. A seemingly senseless attack stunned the nation.
What makes this case exceptional is that
sensational story in 1983.
This case involving Diane Downs really had everything. It had a mother. It had children, murder, and sex, and mystery. And you had an American murder suspect who tried to murder her 3 children and succeeded with one of them and horribly wounded the other 2.
Downs was having a relationship with a married man, a fellow colleague at the US Post Office where she worked.
Diane Downs said she was in love with this man. This was the man she wanted to be with. She thought that by eliminating the children, that would be the last hurdle she would have to jump over to be able to be with this man forever.
Downs had decided that he was the most important person in her life, bar none.
here we've got a mother who relentlessly pursued her own wants and desires and really didn't care about her children.
I suspect she's a classic example of a narcissistic killer. The only thing she thinks about is herself. Her children exist in the world for her. She doesn't exist in the world for her children. And her life history suggests that that is true. This was a way to change her life. This was a way to get a new everything she wanted. And that meant so much to her that it was more important to her than the life of her children.
This killer's story begins over 60 years ago. Diane Downs was born on February 7th, 1955, in Arizona.
Her father was a postal worker and her mum was a stay-at-home mother. Her father was quite the disciplinarian and quite strict. She was telling his children about how to behave, but it was very much a stereotypical family.
As a teenager, Diane met Stephen Downs while in high school, and they became a couple. When she was 17, Diane enrolled in Bible College in Orange, California. but soon problems began to brew.
Diane had gone to Bible college, but that hadn't lasted very long. She was only there for 2 semesters, and she was returned to college because of, quote, her confused behaviour. And that's a theme that we see throughout.
After her expulsion, Diane returned to her parents' home in Arizona.
When she was 18. Now, she was very quick to want to start a family, and they soon had their child.
Their first daughter, Christine, in October 1974. Just a year later, Diane had her second child, a girl she named Cheryl.
Diane and her husband had 2 children together, and after this, her
You were
husband
a fine
decided that's
warrior.
it, enough. Our
Your only
family's
mistake was your
complete.
choice
He
of
goes and
master.
has a
Let the
vasectomy.
winds
But
lift
Diane
you
is absolutely adamant she wants
to a higher
a child,
place.
so she goes and has a
Well,
short-term
who
affair
do we have here?
with another
Tarnished,
man
are
and
you?
becomes pregnant with her son.
Clearly not my
Dan.
Godric's lot. I am Nefeli Lu, tarnished and warrior, like you. I'm hereby to prove my father how utterly repellent this is. This grafting of Godric's ill befits a lord. He's tainted the very winds.
It's a weapon.
If you intend to challenge Godric, I ask you call upon me. The winds run foul with his deeds. I'm
Diane
certain
seemed
father
to
would
really
permit me aid
enjoy
the fight.
the pregnancy stage of motherhood. But when the
Apologies,
baby actually
but I've
arrived,
idled long
she didn't
enough.
quite like that
As fellow
so much. There
tarnished,
were lots
we
of
must each
reports
follow
that she
our
left
own
the children
guidance.
alone and she
Down
left them
whatever road
unattended.
takes us to
When
the
they got
throne of
home,
Elden
they
Lord.
were waiting on the porch for hours at a time.
Apologies, as fellow down whatever.
In 1980, Diane and her husband Stephen divorced. Soon after, Downs was pregnant again. That's because she volunteered to be a surrogate mother.
At the time in the United States, there were approximately 100 surrogate mothers in the entire country. Those were the estimates at the time. So being a surrogate mom put you in a very rarefied piece of air. You were unique.
And she was actually interviewed for a national newspaper in the early 1980s, and she very much seemed to enjoy that experience. So she's got a taste of that limelight, and she will use her role as a woman, her role as a mother, as a way to get people to look at her.
In 1981, she was paid $10,000 by a couple desperate to have a child. 9 months later, Downs gave birth to a baby girl that she handed to the sponsoring couple. That same year, she got a job with the US Postal Service. There she had an affair that would be the catalyst of catastrophe.
He was a married man who she killed. They were sexually involved. Surprise, surprise, this is what she does. And he was fine with just having an affair. But once Diane Downs wanted a real relationship, he was done.
Now, she's had quite a lot of short-term relationships with people in this workplace and in the post office. And he believes that actually this is just going to be a bit of a fling because he knows what her reputation is. But she becomes quite fixated on him. She wants them to have a longer-term relationship.
But instead, he ended things.
He made it very clear to her he didn't want to raise her children and he didn't want to have children by her. And I believe at the point at which he says that to her is when she decided that if he won't have me with my children, maybe he'll have me without them.
The key thing is that he doesn't want to be the stepfather to her children. So her children at this point in time, they become a barrier to her doing what she wants.
By the end of 1981, Diane Downs had moved over 1,200 miles north to Springfield, Oregon.
Now, after she moves to Oregon, she expects that he's just going to follow her. And actually, that doesn't happen. He's not interested.
Diane Downs pursued the man she loved for nearly 2 years, and even visited him to plead for his affection. No avail. The cold-hearted mother of 3 then came to an incredible conclusion. In order to be with the man she loved, she had to care for her children. Diane Downs took her 7-year-old Cheryl 12 miles
She's going kind of out of the way from where she lives. She's on the opposite side of town. So she appears to be doing things that aren't particularly rational.
The children had no idea that their mother had made a dreadful decision. In order to run away with a man she was obsessed with, Diane Downs had planned to kill her children that evening.
When we see a killer who says, well, I was going to kill my children and then I could be with this man forever, we said, well, that's irrational, that's crazy. But to her, I think it made perfect sense.
She's completely smashed any of our expectations about mothers. They should put their children first. And that is something that she's never done.
Diane Downs drove her 3 children to a co-worker's house in Marcola.
And her children get to see the horses and pet the horses, and she talks to this co-worker and they visit for a while.
The problem was, the woman she was visiting had no idea Downs was coming.
This friend doesn't seem to be able to make sense of why Diane has suddenly turned up there.
The unusual trip was part of Diane Downs' carefully designed murder plan. The visit to see the horses would serve as an alibi.
She thought, if I could just get rid of these 3 children, then I could go with the love of my life. But she had to do it, so she conspired for a long time. She arranged this phony visit to a friend's house that she never visited before. She conspired to be driving home late on a lonely road a long way from any houses or any activity. I believe that she was planning this for at least days, could have been even weeks.
That because she's driving down the street with a loaded gun, which means before she stepped into that car, she didn't shoot.
Keeping with her ambitious plan, after leaving the farm, Diane Downs packed the children in the car and drove to a carefully chosen site on Old Mobile Road. She pulled over and got out of the car.
We are talking about a premeditated homicide. This is something that the average person thinks of as inconceivable and impossible.
With the children not suspecting a thing, she went to the trunk of the car. She pulled out a Ruger 22 caliber semi-automatic pistol, walked back to the driver's side with the gun in hand.
When the children first see the gun, they have to be in total disbelief. It has to be inconsistent with all of their experience.
Then she knelt on the seat, leaned forward towards her daughter, 7-year-old Cheryl, from about 6 inches away, fired. On the case on the night of the attack was forensic expert Jim Pett.
One shot was in fact exited without any sternum, and that was probably the bullet that was found in the passenger side, inside the vehicle.
As Cheryl tried to exit the car, her mother leant out of the passenger side door and fired again.
There was another shot in the lower torso here that stayed in.
After the first bullet is fired. The second bullet is fired within a second. But when a gun is fired in close space like a car, it is very loud. And it is really shocking on its own. Stunning that or so.
Bent down shot her 3-year-old son in the back.
The boy was on the side back seat. Spine.
She shot her daughter Christine in the chest and twice. As the girl raised her hand and defended herself, a bullet ripped through the thumb of her left hand.
There was a bullet penetrating wound that went through her hand, exited near the thumb, and then the chest.
In the back of the car, Christy and Danny were clinging to life. Lying in the footwell in the front, Cheryl was mortally wounded.
I suspect that Diane Downs chose mentally and physically between her and them. It's a cold, calculated decision. You don't have to be staring into somebody's eyes to do it.
It was a clinical...
Where in the hell am I?
But Downs' evil plan was far from over. While her children lay dying, Diane Downs continued with her coldly conceived plan and covered her tracks.
Not only did she know she was going to kill her children, she knew that she was going to have to, in order to make it look like somebody else did it, she was going to have to shoot herself.
So she shot herself in the arm. She knew she could probably get away with shooting through the fleshy part of her arm, not do any permanent damage, not break a bone, not incapacitate herself. And then she arranged to take a bandage that she'd already folded up and put in the trunk of her car. It was a large piece of cloth, to wind it around her arm because she had shot herself in her own left arm.
Downs sent the files to the Mackenzie Willamette Hospital in Springfield.
Gunshot wound, particularly multiple.
So slowly that she actually held up traffic. And what's amazing to me, and what makes this a special moment, is here are her children. They've been shot. They're on the literal precipice of death. And she's traveling 10 miles an hour to make sure, from her perspective, that they don't get to the hospital on time.
We know this because the witnesses who pulled up behind her on the road couldn't figure out, why is she going so slowly? And because it was such a winding, lonely road, these people had to follow for a long period of time.
That represents a sordid departure from her obligations I have never seen. That was her last chance to save those children. That was the last chance for her superego, for her moral self to step in and say, I've got to stop it. And that made a truly horrible moment, maybe more horrible than the shooting itself. Because at that point, she proved herself beyond redemption.
Downs' peculiar driving continued to attract attention from other cars and their curious passengers.
A family that happened to be on the same road had a child in the car. I think he was 8 or 9 years old. And earlier in the day, they had seen a red automobile with Arizona plates, which happened to be red. He says to his mother, are all the cars from Arizona red? That's the kind of comment a child would make, but it would cement your mind. So they knew that they were following a car they could later identify as Diane Downs' car. We had a red Nissan car with red Arizona license plates on it.
Diane Downs pulled into the Springfield Hospital about 30 minutes after she'd shot her children.
She finally gets to the hospital. She spills out of the car, says to the emergency room personnel, please save my children. Well, one of them has already died. The other two were just barely saved.
Cheryl, the middle daughter, she was dead on arrival at hospital. She had been shot and she had choked on her own blood and died in pain.
Her daughter Christy has also been shot twice, but she's alive. Danny, the son, had been shot once, and he was clinging on to life as well.
On arrival at hospital, Christy is not even able to speak, so we may have a mixture of direct trauma there, injury to the brain, stroke, and the shock, the horror of what's happened to her. And she ultimately suffers a stroke, most likely as a result of blood loss. So
In her case, it wasn't lethal, but it was totally life-changing. Danny has been shot, and he's paralyzed because of damage to the spinal cord.
Only one member of the family had a bandage on their wounds.
She's got these three fakely injured child in the car, and she goes into the hospital. And she is the only one that appears to have a dressing. She's the only one who appears to have an injury that's been treated. So that suggests to me that actually she's put herself first again. She's made sure that she's okay. She's nursed her own injury whilst her children were in the car dying.
Every action Downs took in the wake of the attempted murder of her 3 children was part of a perverse plot, one that painted herself and her family as the victims of a random attack.
I think the fact in the case that is the most extraordinary is that after she mustered up whatever courage it took to shoot the children, somehow she wasn't a victim.
Oh, what the fuck?
Downs had concocted an incredible story about a bushy-haired stranger, a mysterious carjacker who shot her children. Downs claimed she managed to trick the murderous man and drove hell for leather all the way to the hospital in order to save her fatally wounded children. But as the investigation would soon prove, Downs' story was part of a desperate and devious scheme she'd formulated to get away with murder. The Mackenzie Willamette Medical Center, May 19th, 1983, Springfield, Oregon.
So in the hospital, she starts to put aside her version of events. She says that the car was flagged down by a bushy-haired stranger.
She said had been attacked on a lonely road late at night, and she was on her way driving home. She sees a man, her story, and decides to stop. He's signaling for help.
According to Downs, when she got out of the car, the bushy-haired man shot her in the arm, and then he shot her 3 children.
What didn't make sense is that he would shoot her in the arm, here, not in the head, not in the chest, but shoot her in the arm, and then shoot her 3 children inside the car, blood everywhere, and then she claimed that she had her keys for her car. On a ring, kind of like the ring that I had, but she said she pretended to throw it, the way you could say, pretend to throw a ball to the dog. While he's distracted, she jumps in the car, she says, pulls her door shut, and manages to drive off, she says, at high speed. I believe she said, I drove like a madman.
The sensational story that Diane Downs told about the events baffled everyone.
The story that didn't make sense at all was that Diane Downs would stop her car, open her door, and get out of the car with this man who she didn't know.
But it was not just the odd tale that was troubling. Downs' extraordinary behavior at the hospital also alarmed observers.
But according to the doctor in charge at the hospital, she was calm, she was quite self-assured, she appeared to be in control of her behaviour. She was occasionally laughing, she was occasionally giggling.
Staff at the hospital described her reaction as surprising.
Danny sustained a shot to the spine, and when his mother was told, she that suggesting that perhaps her intention when she shot him.
Again, when she was told of Christie's injuries, she showed little compassion for her injured child.
Diane told the doctors that if her daughter was going to have any kind of brain damage to let her go. It's very unusual as an immediate response.
But it was her daughter Christie's reaction to her own mother that set alarm bells ringing.
Diane comes into the room where Christie is, and she leans over the bed and starts saying to Christie, I love you. And from the people in the room, they say that Christie looked absolutely
As they did not believe Downes' version of the events, investigators quickly identified her as the prime suspect.
In the aftermath of this attack, the decision is made to remove the children from Diana's care, to put them into foster care. They became wards of the state. So Diana at this point has lost her children.
The police did not immediately arrest Downes. Instead, they meticulously gathered evidence in the case. State trooper and forensic expert Jim Pex was called the night of the incident.
I received a call from the sheriff's office that there had been a shooting and involved a woman and children, and that there was a need to process it.
Jim Pex closely examined the entire car that night and in daylight the whole of the next day. When he looked at the passenger side door and the areas underneath the car, he made a series of discoveries that would break the case wide open.
I spotted a blood stain in the door jam of the passenger door. Came from the outside.
According to Diane Downes, the bushy-haired man was standing outside the vehicle on the driver's side of the car. Jim Pex found that the murderer was making around the passenger side of the car, the opposite side to where the bushy-haired man was supposedly attacked.
You can see that there is a small blood stain
Truest of dragons. Lend me thy strength.
Cheryl could not have been standing outside the car on the driver's side. The evidence also showed that the shooter fired the gun within inches of the victim's body.
That was significant in her case because one of the children had tried to open the car door to escape, either because Diane Downes was shooting into the back, because she had already been shot, and fell out of the car, and she was shot again.
More evidence uncovered in the car showed how Christy and Danny had been shot and where those shots came from.
in looking at the clothing that all of the children had on, I was able to do specific tests to determine how far away the end of the muzzle was from each of them at the time that the shot was fired.
You can tell both from powder burns, because when the bullet is fired, there's a certain amount of powder that comes out, and it's still burning. If a gun is fired at very close range to either clothing or to skin, it will cause burning around that you will not see if somebody is shot from a greater distance.
Jim Pex concluded the two children in the back seat had been shot by someone who'd fired from inside the car and from point-blank range. Detectives now had proof that Diane Downs' story about a mysterious bushy-haired stranger was a lie. Whoever shot the children must have been inside the
That would have been the best way. God damn it.
Was left free to talk to the press and protest her innocence.
I decided to go ahead and continue to let her go because we knew there was a relationship to her with this shooting. And so she continued to harangue law enforcement and imply that we're looking at her and that we weren't looking for the bushy-haired stranger. Yeah, she was right, we weren't.
Downs was now the only suspect in the murder of her daughter Cheryl and the attempted murder of her other two children, Christy and Danny. All three had been shot at night in the family car on a lonely country road after a day out. When forensic expert Jim Pex found spent bullet cases inside the car, he determined that all the victims had been shot with a .22 caliber semi-automatic weapon. So they issued a warrant and searched Diane Downs' house in Springfield.
The police are quite surprised at what they find. This does not look like a family home. This looks like the home of a rather narcissistic single woman. So there are 3 pictures on top of the television stand of Diane. Also, one of the things that the police find is a unicorn, which appears to be a kind of memorial to the children. It has their names on it and a date on it. But surprisingly, this wasn't something that Diane came to acquire after the attack. It's something that was already there before. So she's memorializing her children even before they're dead.
The question becomes, how can a mother maim 2 of her children and kill another child and live with herself? And the answer is she can live with herself only if the only thing in her universe was her narcissism, herself. Her children don't exist. They, from her perspective,
cartridge did provide a vital clue that would help solve the case.
Even though the marks on the cartridges from the rifle didn't match test fires, they had the same extractor marks on them as the casings that I retrieved from the vehicle.
The extractor marks are made on the soft shell casing when a bullet is ejected from the barrel of a gun.
The way the gun gets rid of that bullet is a thing called an ejector. As that gun cycles, it pulls the shell back and then kicks it out of the port, and it's gone, and then chambers another round. Let's say you have a pistol that's already loaded, and you decide, I want to unload the gun. You would then release the magazine, that's all the other bullets, and then, pointing in the safe direction, you pull the slide, and when you pull it back, it will take the unfired bullet, so bullet and shell, and kick it out of the gun. She had apparently done this, had cycled some rounds of ammunition through the gun, and they had ejector marks on them. Even within the same brand, make, model, and year of a gun, those ejector marks are somewhat unique. Even if you had two identical Ruger pistols, the ejector marks will be slightly different. They're imperfections in manufacturing of the gun. There'll be small differences, but there will be differences.
Agent Bex placed two 22 caliber bullets side by side under a comparison microscope. One ejected by Downes' rifle, and the other one that was found inside the crime scene car.
What you have is a split image down the middle, and what we're looking at are extractor marks. And as you can see, what fine striations here, these extractor marks were both made by the same extractor, which means there is a relationship between the cartridge casing from the crime scene and the cartridges from her apartment. Then we knew that this is a moment where there is a relationship to the fired casings that hit the children, to the cartridges that were inside to the magazine rifle.
Checking sales records, police knew Diane Downes had owned a Ruger 22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. After test firing one exhaustively, Jim Bex found several extractor marks on the casing. He concluded that the Ruger 22 caliber pistol was the murder weapon, but it was never found.
While Diane Downes managed to dispose of the gun, but at home she had a rifle that also shot 22 caliber rounds. And when the police processed this evidence, they found that they were the same manufacturer as the bullets that were the same as the ejector marks.
Bullet telltale extractor marks Diane Downes for murder and attempted murder of her 3 children. On February the 28th, 1984, 9 months after the crime, she was brought.
When the arrest finally went down,
she appeared at the main county courthouse in after the charges were read. Diane Downes spoke on herself.
her attorney stands up after he's finished all the legal evidence and says, besides your own, my client is pregnant. Be bad for her health to go to jail. I was sitting in that courtroom seat. You could hear the entire room take a big deep breath. It was stunning. Just absolutely stunning.
According to rumors, the father was a local reporter.
There was one reporter that had sex with her, and I can tell you this, it wasn't me. And she became pregnant from that. But she loved the attention that she got.
By the time the trial began on May the 8th, 1984, Downes was 8 months pregnant.
Obviously, she was pregnant at the time of the trial, and this was something that I think she thought would help her garner quite a bit of sympathy.
Her antics, however, were not enough to fool the jury. A mountain of evidence went a long way to convincing them of Downes' guilt in the crime. Then, her surviving daughter, Christy, took to the stand.
This little girl mother's tried to kill her. She's living with an man. Her sister is dead. Her brother's in wheelchair for the rest of his life. And now she has to sit in front of strangers and talk about the most difficult night of her life.
She gets up on the stand, and when the person asked her the question, who shot you and your sibling, she said, my mum.
This was one of those moments in court where everything is still, nobody dares breathe.
Christy laid out how her mother first shot Cheryl, then turned and shot Danny in the back, then shot her twice in the chest.
The testimony just tore your heart apart. This wasn't the critical piece of information. There was lots of physical evidence of what Diane Downs had done. But I think
Don't run!
June the 17th, 1984, the jury found Diane Downs guilty of the murder of her 7-year-old daughter Cheryl and the attempted murder of her daughter Christy and son Danny. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. 10 days after she was found guilty, Diane gave birth to a baby girl. The child was immediately given up for adoption. At the same time, the prosecutor in the case, Fred Hughes, adopted the 2 children who survived their mothers.
After the trial was over, Fred adopted 2 children. And he did a wonderful job of raising those 2 kids. So I admire him for it.
It was a lifetime commitment to be the father and mother to these children that they really deserve. And Diane Downs denied it.
In prison, Diane Downs managed another surprise. On July the 11th, 1987, 3 years after her incarceration, she escaped.
She got out of prison, climbed the fence. She was loose for more than a week, and she was only about 10 blocks away. She was staying with some man. Later, Wallenheim, he said he thought she was dead.
Diane Downs' mother tried to kill her 3 children. And to this day, she retains her innocence.
I can tell you the whole story to Diane Downs stands out because this woman was pure evil.
She did something that's unheard of. She violated that sacred duty and attempted in cold blood to kill all 3 of her children for no other reason than to increase her chances of having a particular boyfriend.
I don't think there is anything worse than this kind of betrayal by your own mother. Your mother is the one that should nurture you, should protect you.
The cold-hearted murder of her daughter Cheryl and the attempted murder of her 2 other young children, Christy and Danny, makes Diane Downs one of the world's most evil killers. Seattle, Washington, November the 5th, 2003. The King County Superior Court. In front of a packed room, 54-year-old killer Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to 14 years of aggravated. Another body was found years later, the terrible death toll in 1452.
4 young women who have run away from home, people who are vulnerable. He disposed of their bodies in the river.
Among the many victims for young girls who run away from home.
She was a little girl when she was murdered by him.
She deserved the best of everything. She deserved to have a very happy life.
Despite police suspicions, it took nearly 20 painstaking years to gather enough evidence to convict Ridgway for the murders. The man who became known as the killer murdered 49 young women and is suspected of killing many more. All that makes Caddy Ridgway one of the world's most lethal
Gary Ridgway has a special place for serial killers because we're talking about a man who's responsible clearly for killing at least 49 women.
After he's murdered his victims, he disposes of their bodies in the Green River. The Tim's bodies are found in the river, they're found weighted down, and he hasn't just raped and killed these women, he has extended his power and control over them. So some are found with objects inserted inside them, stones essentially.
This was operating in plain sight. What could be more horrifying? If you walked out into the street and said, "Good morning, Gary," you would not say for 1 second that Ridgway was a serial killer.
Elaine Waterfield, a young reporter with the Seattle-produced Intelligencer at the time.
Was viewed as largely unremarkable and almost kind of uninteresting, maybe a little bit odd. Gary
I think that this case really did have a significant impact on the community and within the serial killers for many, many years. He was named the Green River Killer, and this person didn't have an identity. He was this faceless monster.
Every time a body was found in a spot that it could be attributed to the killer, and that included some cases in New Orleans and Alabama, British Columbia. It was terrifying to women growing up.
Virginia Graham's sister, Deborah Estes, was one of Ridgway's victims.
You know, we're both small. She's was about she loved the color purple. That's her favorite color. She absolutely loved horses. She loved horses.
Deborah disappeared in September 1982.
As you look at it, you can't begin to understand this specific
Candace Diskin's younger sister, in 1987.
My sister's name was Joseph Hayes. Bobby Joe, that was her nickname. I think of her often. She just had a big, beautiful smile and big blue eyes, and she was a funny kid.
Bobby Joe's body was not found for 4 years. All the while, Candace suspected the worst, that her sister had been murdered by the Green River Killer.
It was a really tough time not knowing where so many people's loved ones, their daughters, where they were, what was happening to them.
Sergeant Frank Ashley and his partner Bob Lamoria served jointly as supervisors on the Green River Task Force. They and their fellow detectives worked tirelessly to track down the man who was arguably the most prolific mass murderer in U.S. history.
We were finding victims 2 or 3 times a week during certain periods of time during the investigation.
We had victims that were missing for over 2 years that had never been reported missing. So it made it easy for Mr. Ridgway to get away with it as long as he did, because we were sometimes 2 or 3 years behind him.
This killer's story begins over 70 years ago. Gary Ridgway was born in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1949.
In the middle of 3 sons to a ferocious, domineering mother and a bus driver father. His parents argued relentlessly, but he always took his mother's side. The mother was to become the most significant figure in his life.
The other thing about his mother is this. Up till roughly age 13, he had a bedwetting problem, and his mother would deal with his problem by personally washing his genitalia. This kind of behavior is very unusual. It is going to inevitably lead to a confusion about sexuality. And indeed, Ridgway admitted to his psychiatrist that he had lustful sexual feelings towards his mother.
As a teenager, he was obsessed with sex.
By the time he reaches adolescence, Ridgway has got what only his brother has surcharged sexual. Sex. Everything goes.
Struggled in school. Still back to phase.
He's always the slow one. He's always a bit behind. So always being the odd one out, not having that sense of belonging. And one of the things that Gary Ridgway learned to protect himself was to be violent, was to instill fear in others. Armor.
16, Ridgway viciously attacked a 6-year-old boy.
The child survived. This episode hints that there is some psychotic, disorganized process going on just below the surface.
Ridgway was not identified, charged with 1969, joined the U.S. Navy. The following year, Ridgway married his first wife, but his mother was still ever present in their relationship.
This was a woman who was so dominating that even after he got married, his mother was
soon after getting married, Ridgway was still with the U.S. Navy. Unable to contain his sexual urges, he left individuals.
Wherever he was visiting sex workers. And in several cases, he created venereal diseases which he was angry about. Both against the sex workers. And I think that just fed on it. So that anger, that hatred, that personalization of these women.
When Ridgway returned the following year, he found his wife dating another man. The couple divorced in January 1972. A year later, in 1973, he found a new wife. While he was married, Ridgway also found a new outlet for his passions.
Ridgway suddenly became something of a religious zealot, Bible thumper, proselytizer. It's kind of fervent, almost out of proportion, his interest in religion.
Religion plays a very interesting role for some subset of serial killers. The problem is that religion, all the medications, none of them have proven more powerful than the third.
Ridgway and his new wife had a son. On the surface, it seemed like an ordinary, God-fearing, all-American family.
Was very guilty about that. So,
life visionary. Young finger, in his mind, And your suspect.
Of course, he's still going. Prostitutes.
Visiting prostitutes tonight and his mother ever present in their relationship. Ridgway's second marriage was ended in 1981. Soon after, he had his first run-in with the law and was arrested in 1982 for soliciting a prostitute. The minor charge would be an ominous sign of the women he would prey on and the monstrous murders that he was about to commit. Driven by an insatiable sex drive, Ridgway had started to pick up street prostitutes from the SeaTac Strip, the road that connects Seattle to the neighboring city of Tacoma.
This is a highway that was frequented by sex workers at the time.
Ridgway's first victim was just
Still
16
have enough
years old.
arcane talent. I will
Night
get
after
that.
work, he picked the sex worker up from the strip. Sergeant Frank actually supervised the task force assigned to catch him.
These women were in the area of Pacific Highway South, and that's where he came in contact with them and abducted them. And usually these were after hours, during the hours of darkness. How he would get them into his car is anybody's guess.
Ridgway took his first victim to a desolate location along the banks of the Green River, just outside Seattle.
Oh, shoot!
Supervised the search of the first crime scene.
The first victim got tangled up in some brush in the rocks, and her body was exposed in plain view.
Her kidnap and killing in July 1982 would set a sinister pattern that would result in 49 confirmed murders. Ridgway typically targeted young women drawn to the peace and promise of America's Pacific Northwest.
He's preying on vulnerable women, so women who are either sex workers or young women who have run away from home.
They were young women doing the best they could in the way they knew how. They were 15, 16, 17 years old, 20 years old.
After his first murder, Ridgway went on a frenzied killing spree. In just 5 weeks, he picked up 5 more women from the SeaTac Strip. By August the 15th, 1982, Ridgway had kidnapped, raped, and callously killed all of them. He dumped one of the bodies near a creek and 4 in the Green River. The defiled bodies were found in clusters along the banks.
The homicides started in 1982, and the publicity that was being received or broadcasted every member of this county, the state of Washington, the United States, were aware of these murders.
In August of 1982, a task force was formed to catch the so-called Green River Killer. The team scoured the area and made a series of grim discoveries.
This was the site of 3 of the victims. There were 2 upstream of waves, pushed into the water and weighted down with rocks. A third
what's his nuts?
was left on the bank in the tall grass. I assumed that he thought he was going to get caught. He saw somebody dump the body and ran, and she didn't make it in the water.
When the call came out, we were the dispatch to the task force when he set up a
Cough up your coin. All of it.
for any heirs, fibers, or anything else that might
Analyzing the detectives quickly determined a pattern in the killer's behavior. He would head to the SeaTac Strip after work.
Wait, please.
Did not know it.
I surrender.
Their fate was sealed.
His method of operation, his MO, was taking isolated areas, sometimes along river banks,
knew you would.
Long stretches of
You're a man of reason.
so that
Through and
he can see
through.
any approaching vehicles and give him plenty of time to avoid being seen.
Well,
Ridgway would park and persuade the women to get
like
out
me.
of his truck.
Now, how did I get that wrong?
Then he
I
would
took you for a
attack.
demi-human or some such.
Each
An innocent mistake, I assure you. Well, water under the bridge. Now we're squared up. How about we play nice from now on?
Admitted to the pleasure he sought out of watching the life seep out of each of the bodies. I feel it.
A true man of reason. Just what I like about you. I'm Patches. Patches the untethered. Tarnished like you, only free-spirited. Nomadic, you might say. Only for now, those retired soldiers turned bandits. They're paying for my gruel. In exchange for my, well, showing them the ropes. But honestly, this looting racket is bloody terrifying. Frankly, I'm ready to wash my hands clean. Maybe set up a legitimate shop. So don't be a stranger. I'll be ready to wheel and deal come next time. Don't forget to pop back for another visit. I'll be ready to wheel and deal.
Man, fuck it. Hello?
Well, nice of you to drop in finally. It's all a bit ad hoc, but I'm sure you'll find something. And welcome to Patches Emporium, where you won't need a refund, because everything's top-notch.
Bitch. Hold up. Slow down.
Drop your weapon! You know whose fucking fault this is? It's fucking obvious now, ain't it?
Coward, monster, vicious brute, friend, beast and prostitute, conscience dull by demon rum, liquor, thy name delirium. Tomorrow, we awaken to a new dawn, and on the eve of this momentous occasion, it's my pleasure to introduce Atlantic City's esteemed treasurer, the Honorable Enoch Malcolm.
Mr. Gary, thank you for that. Lady.
Cheers for that.
Everything else, boy. Listen, very safe. The winter of '88, how would you remember? Biblical. Laughing, snowman, freezing. Now, who?
Well, well, well. I should have known, you skinny little thief.
Uh-oh.
The thugs demand vengeance.